Hi, everybody. I'm Kelly, and I'm really excited because I'm here today with my very dear friend, Jennifer Harvey Sallin. For those of you who don't know Jen, she is a gifted coach and mentor, and she is the founder of Intergifted, which is a wonderful community that supports and connects and offers growth opportunities to gifted people around the world. So I met Jen many years ago through Intergifted, and she has been and continues to be my coach and mentor. And so she supported me through this and continues to support me through this wild and wonderful gifted growth journey. And so over the years, as part of my own growth experience and in collaborating with Jen, this wonderful initiative called the Gifted Mindfulness Collective has emerged, which has been my pet project, I guess, and it's very near and dear to my heart. Mindfulness has been something that's been instrumental to me on my gifted growth journey. I can't even imagine what my journey would look like if I didn't have mindfulness. And I know that's for you, Jen, that's been very instrumental as well. So she is here to chat with me today about the Gifted Mindfulness Collective, how that's emerged, and we're sort of talking about this really interesting intersection between mindfulness and giftedness and how it can support gifted people on the gifted path of development. So welcome, Jen. Thank you for being here. I'm really looking forward to our chat today.
Me too. Thank you so much for inviting me on.
Yeah. So maybe I'm wondering if, sort of giving a bit of context and backstory to how the Gifted Mindfulness Collective emerged, maybe talking about our journeys with giftedness and mindfulness. And that's when I'm chatting with people about mindfulness, that's always the first question that comes up for me. So, what's been your journey? Because there's so many different doors into mindfulness, and even the gifted path itself, there's so many different, it looks different. There's a lot of similarities, obviously, but it's so different. So I love hearing about, kind of how that intersection happened for people. So maybe if you want to talk about how that path has evolved for you.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, it does come into people's lives in such different ways. And some people, I think, are just naturally interested in these kinds of things.
Yeah.
I wasn't necessarily one of them because I came from a really strict religious background. And so in my early 20s, I left the religious background that I came from. And I was like, okay, anything to do with ideas about God or like anything, the idea of meditation, any of it was just like, nope, nope. I just want to live in the regular world and not have to think about that stuff.
Yeah.
And also, I mean, even though I had left the religion, there was a really strong thing against the New Age movement. And so there was like the devil will enter your mind if you sit down to meditate and these kinds of,
Right.
And though I had, I rejected the religion and everything, I still had these things in my head that was just like, avoid that. So like, besides the fact that sometimes it's mixed in with spirituality, I still had that other thing that, so like there was the God piece and then there was like the devil piece and it was all mixed in with that.
Yeah.
Plus I just wanted to focus on being a business success. And, I was really in that phase. Like I got away from the small-mindedness, what I felt was the small-mindedness of my past. And I just wanted to like go forward. And especially since I came from sort of an anti-intellectual milieu, that I was like, okay, yes, business, learning, let's go. So I did that and I was like really successful. And, so from the outside, everything looked lovely. And yet it was not. Yeah.
Can I ask you, so you're sort of in your early 20s.
Yeah.
Trying to navigate all of this. And how do you know you're gifted at this time?
Well, I was identified as a well, yes and no. I had been identified as a kid and I went through the gifted program at school. And I was always like half in my class, half in the older class. And so, but yeah, I mean, I'd finished college early, and like I'd done everything in a super accelerated rate. So, I mean, I was aware that I was quicker than most kids, and I had been identified as gifted, but nobody ever talked about it. So it wasn't like I would have never been able to say to myself, oh, well, I'm gifted and that affects me in these ways.
Right.
So
Yes.
I really knew at that point, I could really see that there was something drastically different than for my friends around me, in my social circle. And you know, I thought that would change a lot. Like I hear this a lot from gifted people that, you know, you're growing up and you think, oh, well, I'll hurry up and become an adult, because then once I become an adult, like I'll get along with other people, and like the world will make sense somehow.
Yes. Yes.
That we grow up and we're like, but where are all the adults? Like I thought this was going to make sense to me, and everything just feels the same as growing up, you know. And I really felt like that. All the same issues, you know, you could find with 40-year-olds, you could find the same issues that you had on the playground with 5-year-olds. And I was like, you know, like shocked and panicked about the absurdity of what I felt I saw, you know. So yeah, so I knew something was different. Definitely, I understood that my motivations were different, and that my values seemed to play out in different ways. And so there was something that I was observing was very different, but I wouldn't have known to put the word gifted on it at that point in my life. And so I was like becoming a great business success, but I was then in a relationship that was like, you know, not with a gifted person, and I didn't know that. And I was doing all sorts of, you know, gifted 101 bad no-nos, like projecting potential onto him.
Oh, yeah.
You know, saying, oh, if I just work hard enough, if you just work hard enough, you know, you can become like whatever my vision for him was. And it wasn't what he wanted for his life. And it was really hard. I couldn't make any sense of that. So I was pushing really, really hard for things to change there, and feeling really up against a wall. Like I was supposed to be satisfied with what there was, but I absolutely wasn't.
Yeah.
And I didn't know who to turn to or how to like deal with that.
Mm-hmm.
Plus in the business world, I was very successful, but I was moving up really fast and constantly getting bored. I mean, the really usual gifted stuff. And that started to get me to a point where I started to have conflicts with my superiors, because they wanted me to have certain values and I had other ones.
Right.
And they would say, you know, you just need to calm down and fit with the program. And that wasn't
fit in.
Yeah, and that wasn't working out so well. So then I had a panic attack on the first day of a new job, like severe panic attack. And of course I didn't know what it was, and I thought I was dying and all of those things. And that started a really bad cycle, like a downturn in my life. I think I was just turning 25 around then. And it got really, really bad. I didn't want to leave the house and stuff. I mean, I was still working every day. So I had learned to fake it quite well, but oh my God, it was a terrible time. And I just, you know, after about a year of that, I started slowly discovering, I met a friend, for example, my first gifted friend, I mean, that I remembered in my 20s, the one that I could identify as gifted. And she had never been in religion or anything, and she started recommending these books to me, Eckhart Tolle, The Power of Now, and Conversations with God from Neil Donald Walsh. And I was like, no way, not touching that stuff, you know. But she kept talking to me about these things, and finally, you know, I met another gifted friend. He recommended this to me, so I finally was like, okay, well, I guess it's time. So I think about a year after she recommended it to me, and she recommended it to me for the issues I was going through, the panic attacks and stuff. And about a year after she recommended it to me, then I was like, okay, fine, I'll do it. And so I started reading, and it just, I mean, there were a lot of things that made a lot of sense for me. And I started to think that, you know, I'm pushing so hard. I'm pushing for my relationship to be what it's not. I'm pushing for me to fit into the corporate world, and I don't. I'm pushing for people around me to be interested in the things that I'm interested, and they're not. That I'm interested in, and they're not. And, you know, at some point I was just like, okay, I'm going to have to sort of accept that these things are the way they are, and what else can I do in this world, you know? And so one thing led to another, and I eventually signed up for a meditation retreat. And
that was your first, you just jumped right into a meditation retreat?
I went to like a meditation group one day, and I was like, oh my God, this is not for me. It was, it was truly, truly not for me. I mean, that particular group. And so I thought, well, and plus, because I had these two gifted friends, I started thinking, well, maybe it's this, maybe, and I still wasn't like a believer in spirituality or something, but there was, you know, we were connecting around this topic, you know, growth and this kind of stuff. So I was like, well, maybe this is the thing that's connecting us. So maybe if I go to other like spiritual related things, then I'll meet other people like us, you know? Right. So I was thinking that was the connection piece. And so I tried this one, and I right away I was like, oh my God, no, like this is just more like being with the people at work or whatever. Yeah. So it wasn't for me. But at that one, they did mention this idea of a meditation retreat, which I had never heard of at that point. And so I looked it up, and I found one 20 minutes from my house, and like a few weekends later, there I was. So it was funny. It was like a Buddhist meditation retreat. I knew nothing about any of this stuff. I got some of the Dalai Lama's books before I went, and I read about compassion and these things. And for me, it was like a whole shift it was such a whole shift in everything that I understood about these kinds of words and virtues, because I mean, for me, it was all linked to the religion. So like, God is a compassionate God, then I would see him like killing whoever in the Bible and stuff. And so none of that ever made sense. I used to argue with my parents and my leaders about it, and they would get super mad at me.
Oh, I know, yeah.
But compassion, forgiveness, all of these kinds of words that kind of, you know, you see circling around mindfulness and meditation, for me, those were all like associated with some sort of evil authority who's, you know, like psychopathic authority who's, you know, going to get you. And I was supposed to somehow feel that was compassionate or loving or whatever. So I got to the meditation retreat, and I had been practicing on my own, you know, to some degree based on what I had been learning with Eckhart Tolle. And I had also read, of course, John Kabat-Zinn and Andrew Weil, and, you know, some of these different people out there that talk more about the traditional mindfulness stuff. And, oh God, that was hard. 4 days, noble silence. And I just thought, you know, by the end of the first 15 minutes, I thought, I'm going to kill myself. I got to get out of here. I cannot deal with these, I cannot deal with these thoughts. They're just nonstop, and I can't do it.
Yeah.
They just circled around, you know, problem seeking, irritation with everything, you know, I mean, you know.
Yeah.
And so by the second day, I thought, I don't know, maybe I got to quit. I mean, it's terrible. And then a person in the beginners group with me basically said the same thing aloud when we were allowed to talk and share. And she said, I think I can't do it. I got to get out of here. And it was just something, the way she said it, I thought, you know, I really need this change. I really need to learn how to be okay with myself. And I need to know how to, you know, find another way through, because all of my force, all of the, you know, force efforts that I've been doing in all of the other directions were not working out. So it's like, you need help, so take it, you know? Yeah. And so that really became for me not just like I hope this will give me a bunch of stuff. It became this really kind of deep internal commitment to myself to say, hey, listen, you deserve this help. It's you're discovering it's not like a bunch of people with their fingers like this saying Om and everybody smiling and all of, you know, it's people working through their hardship essentially, you know, including yourself.
Yes.
And yeah, it was like, okay, but the feeling at that time was, okay, but I deserve this, even if it's hard work and everything else. And so there was this kind of, you know, so typical, right? Like a frantic run, sprint to everything. Okay, learn it all, figure it all out, get to the meditation retreat, and then just do it, and it's all going to be done, and you're going to figure it all out. You're going to be a different person, and everything's going to be great. And at that retreat, in that moment, I was like, oh my God, this is going to be such hard work.
Yeah.
And I can do it. So it was like all the frantic pace, like in this one moment really like dropped down. You know, sometimes in sometimes we talk about the idea of dropping through
Yes.
a thought. And
Yeah.
this was really, this dropped through to another dimension.
Yeah.
And then I was like, okay, I don't even know how to be this person. Like, I don't know how to be a person who goes slow and who, well, essentially is mindful. I don't know.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I know how to think a lot, but I don't know how to be mindful. And so there was this huge shift there, because I was approaching all of it kind of in this, maybe a childish way a bit, and sort of unconscious way of like, fix my problems, hurry up.
Yeah.
And then when I got into it, there was like this, and made the commitment, there was kind of this softness that started to enter into the whole idea of it. It was like, yeah, well, you're not doing this for any authority. You don't have to be good at this. You don't have to anything. Like,
Yeah.
this is kind of a choice to sit down and be with yourself and be present with yourself and allow yourself to do whatever process you need to do to, validate your existence at this point, not for an authority or not for the other people around, or not so you can like write a cool blog about mindfulness or something.
Yes.
Just for you as a human being.
Yeah.
So that was really the beginning of the journey. And, throughout all of that, then the panic attacks that I had been having started to subside, obviously. I mean, once I could slow down and realize a lot of my motivations, deal with the questions of, compassion, redefine a lot of those virtues for myself in ways that made sense to me.
Yeah.
Things started to, I don't want to say get better in my life, even though that's true. It seems like a simplistic way to say it, but I started to know myself better,
Yeah.
and life became much more interesting, ironically. The more I slowed down and kind of just learned how to spend time with myself, the more interesting life became. Not with the million things, not with all of the fact-checking and the going down rabbit holes in Wikipedia, nonstop. Not that kind of interesting, but rich, artistic, creative, smooth like velvet.
Yes. Spacious.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And that made then all of the going, because I still do the rabbit holes, the Wikipedia, nonstop Wikipedia searches, the research, still do it all, but it's in the context of that spaciousness. And so it's really motivated by the things that, come from within myself, as opposed to, got to do this, I have to,
Yeah.
Somehow if I don't, threat, whatever that kind of threat is, it's like, oh, this sounds interesting to me, so I'm going to do it, which is a very different stance to come from, as opposed to, oh, I got to do this because I can't deal with it if I don't, I can't deal with the situation if I don't, or because if I don't, I'm not going to look smart enough, or whatever.
Yes. Everything becomes much more conscious. Yeah. Much more conscious based. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, I relate to so many things along your path, and I love what you were saying when you went on the retreat, and it was about making a deep internal commitment to yourself, because really that's what mindfulness has been for me as well. But all the parallels for me, I grew up, wasn't in a really strict religious household, but Italian family. So we were Italian Catholic. So we were forced to go to church every Sunday. Although it was interesting because my dad, who came from the stricter Catholic background, never came to church with us. And my mom, who was not Catholic and converted to Catholicism after she married my dad, she would take us to church, but my dad never went, and I always thought, that's so unfair. Why does he not have to go? And he would always just say, well, that's the way it is, and it was always so boring, and I just never got anything out of it. And I went to Catholic school, and so by the time I was coming out of high school, I was just like, it didn't make any sense to me, and I just had so many questions about it that nobody had answers to, and I thought, okay, I'm done with this, and went off to university, and kind of just same as you, just like didn't want to have anything to do with it, not new age, anything, nothing. Now, all this time, I do not know that I'm gifted. I was not identified growing up. So I'm very much more of a visual learner, and I think that's where really my gifted strengths lie, is visual abstract thinking. So verbal I've always had to really struggle with, and you know, in school you don't really stand out if you're not really you're doing really well with the verbal stuff. So yeah, it was just, I was never really identified, and I was a late bloomer for sure. But yeah, when I got to university, then, you know, I grew up in a really small town. We had nothing. So I was bored. I got into trouble a lot. But when I got to university, all these worlds opened up to me, and I was like a kid in a candy store, just exploring. But again, it was all the intellectual stuff. And I just went, you know, heads down in the intellectual achievement. And I ended up getting into psychology because I think mostly because I wanted to figure myself out. Like I was just I was confused about a lot of things. I had so many conflicts and whatnot growing up, and I was just trying to figure myself out and figure out my family. Like, there's something here. Like, what is going on?
Yeah.
And then I hit a point kind of in my late 20s where I just felt like I looked really good on paper, and that was it. And it felt really empty to me. And I had that urge for something more than just the intellectual pursuits. I basically, what I had available to me at the time was a lot of the new age stuff. It was a lot, you know, Oprah and a lot of the new age kind of stuff, even though I wouldn't really say Oprah is new age, but you know, there was like limited availability to things. I knew about Buddhism, but I would never really had been exposed to it. But so I started exploring all of that, and I kind of just left all my psychology stuff behind and started exploring all that. And then it wasn't really until I became a parent, and my kids are both twice exceptional. Again, didn't know that initially, still didn't know I was gifted at that point. And we were having a lot of issues with my son, who is very emotionally intense. And he was getting into a lot of trouble. He was very misunderstood, and things escalated so much. We were having issues with teachers. We were having issues with a lot of his coaches, and we were just trying to figure out, you know, what is going on. And finally, it occurred to me to explore giftedness. It just sort of popped into my head one day, which is funny. I went through I did a PhD in psychology, and I was trained as a clinician. I knew very little about giftedness. I think maybe we spent 1 or 2 classes talking about
we didn't
gifted assessment.
We didn't do any of it. I mean, I never heard the word giftedness in my psychology training.
Oh, wow. Yeah. We spent maybe a couple of classes talking about it. And it's like, oh, well, you just administer the quiz, or, you know, and they score at this level and they're gifted or you're not. And then they go to a special program, and you write that in your report, and you send them off to this, send them off to the special education program if you meet this cutoff, right? And that was it. Yeah. So I don't know why it just popped into my head that, I wonder about giftedness. So that's how I came across Intergifted and how we got connected. But meanwhile, sort of while all of this was unfolding, I'm also emotionally intense, and I was losing my you-know-what a lot. And I felt like I was going to really lose my marbles if I needed to do something. And I had been to counselors over the years, and it was, would help give me a little bit, but it was never the full thing. So I was trying to figure out, what is it that I need here? And I've always felt this kind of attraction to Buddhism and mindfulness. And I thought, you know what, I'm just going to look for a meditation group in my area, and I'm going to go and check it out. So I found a local Zen group, and I went there. And really for me, it was just about, I have to figure out how to manage my own mind, because we've got a really complicated situation unfolding at home, and I'm not going to get through this. I know I am not going to get through this if I don't learn how to manage what's going on internally.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Same.
Yeah.
Same. Yes.
Yeah. So that was the drive for me, or the motivating factor. So yeah, I went to a local Zen group, and I think I really lucked out because the Zen master who leads the group is just a very wonderful, open person. He's also a mindfulness-based psychotherapist, and so I think I just really lucked out. And so I just started going once a week and doing this this Zen meditation practice. And I remember the very first time I sat down, didn't get a lot of instruction or guidance. I had dabbled in meditation before, but I didn't really have a framework for it. I didn't really know what I was doing. I felt like I didn't know what I was supposed to be doing. And so I really liked having the group and having a teacher who could, give me some guidance. But in Zen, they don't give you a lot of guidance. It's just sort of like, okay, well, you're going to focus on your breathing, and you're going to sit and just notice what comes up. And so I was like, okay. So I remember.
It's like, just sit and notice what comes up. Great. Yeah. It's going to be a good fun hour.
Yeah, exactly. And I remember so vividly the first time sitting down on my meditation cushion, and in Zen you do the wall gazing practice. So I'm looking at the wall in front of me. And I remember this very distinct feeling of my mind feeling like I was putting it in a straitjacket. Yeah. Like that was the image that came up for me, that my mind was going, no, like it was screaming, no, 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 you are trying to control me and I am not having it. Huh. And I was like, wow, yeah. I have never noticed this before. Yeah. And so I just kind of, said in my mind, well, we're going to give it a try. We're going to give it a try and sit here. And yeah, I just kept going back week after week and doing this practice. Did a little bit at home when I could of, kind of a more formal kind of a practice. But then what I noticed over time was this spaciousness that started to develop. And I was less reactive to things, and I didn't have to think about it. It was just all of a sudden there was all this space for things to be there, and I wasn't reacting to them automatically. Like even thoughts would come up about something interesting that would catch my eye, and I wouldn't react and jump, oh, I gotta, follow this and go down this rabbit hole. I would just notice that, these things are coming up, and there was space for them to be there without me feeling like I had to react to them. And that was just like, I'd never had that before. Yeah. And was really, really amazing. And so I just kept going and I kept doing it. And as I continued, and then it was sort of after I had just begun doing mindfulness and was noticing things that I met you and started, putting that big puzzle piece into the mix, giftedness. And then I had this framework all of a sudden, right, to start making sense of, oh, okay. So it was the combination of being able to understand these things, plus all the spaciousness for them to be there and to be able to work with them in a mindful way, right? That was just, so yeah, I can't imagine, I don't know what it's like to have done it without that piece, but I can't imagine what it would be like without having the space. I would imagine it would be a real struggle.
I see people doing it all the time.
Yeah.
It's not, I wouldn't describe it as particularly a fun process.
Yeah.
By the time I rediscovered giftedness, I had several years in really, really dedicated practice. I even kind of quit my job in the US and I came to Europe, and I just was, sort of floating here and there. I was still working a little bit with clients, but very little. And just giving myself, I just was really looking at myself and going, okay, yeah, you got to figure this out, and taking the time to do it. And then that was before I just rediscovered the giftedness question. And so by the time I rediscovered the giftedness question, there was all this space to figure it out. So it was like, okay, one thing at a time, that's cool, that's good, process, it was very, very, velvety.
Yeah.
I didn't have that, oh my God, no way. It was like, yeah, okay, welcome this, and grateful to be finding it out now, and
Yeah.
and all of that. So yeah, but I do see lots of people who have not had this background, and they bring a sort of very frantic energy to it. Oh my God, what do I do with this? Oh my God, does this mean how am I going to deal with it? It's just the franticness that I described
react.
before the retreat,
Yeah.
And still many times after the retreat. It's not like after the retreat everything was just 100% perfect for the rest of my life.
Oh my gosh, no. I related to what you were saying about going into this retreat, and because I've done a number of retreats over the years, and I remember one of the first like major ones that I went to. I think it was a 10-day, and I was like, okay, gonna do this enlightenment thing. I'm making it happen. Like, I've got 10 days. I am gonna make this enlightenment thing happen.
That's cute.
Yeah. So, because you think you're doing it all day, every day for 10 days, noble silence, right? So what else is there to do? But
sure, you're just going to go straight to it.
Discover it. And the very same thing, like the first few days, I was like, dying internally because my mind was just going, and I'm going, shut up, we're working for enlightenment here. Like, you gotta stop.
I know.
We have to get to the place. And so, the more I was focused on that, the more my mind would go.
Yeah.
Fortunately, we had people at the retreat. If you were struggling, you could go and you could set up a time to go meet with them to say, I'm struggling with this. And I remember going in to talk to the advisor person. I said, my mind just won't shut up. Like, I'm trying to do the work here. My mind won't shut up. And I remember him saying, he said, well, this is what minds do. This is just their natural state. They do that. So he said, what would your mind be doing? And he said, what would you be doing if your mind wasn't doing that?
Yeah. And,
you'd be dead. Or, you wouldn't have brain activity, because this is just the nature of the mind and what it does. So he said, just enjoy it.
Yeah.
And be with it. And I was like, oh my gosh. And I have been doing this Zen practice for all these years, but nobody had ever explained it to me like that. And so I remember going back and sitting in the meditation hall with this idea of just enjoy it. And I remember, I like tears just started coming down my face because my mind was so happy. I just remember my mind feeling so happy that I was not fighting it anymore.
Exactly.
And I was just letting it do its thing. Like, as intense as it was and as busy as it always is, I just let it do its thing. And oddly enough, as soon as I did that, it started to quiet down.
Yeah.
And, so it's just that the whole thing about resistance and fighting all of these overexcitabilities and fighting all of the intensity. And because if you haven't learned how to do it any other way, that just seems like the natural thing to do. And so many people have had to fight those urges and fight those intensities because you are going to get into trouble otherwise. When you're a child, you're going to get into trouble, or people are not going to accept you, or, and all of these things. So, it's a lifetime of resistance.
Well, and an extreme situation for a lot of people who have gifted specific trauma is that the idea of just letting your mind do its thing and enjoy it is like, if I enjoy this, the other shoe is going to drop anytime now.
Yeah.
So literally, and I always say this when I'm teaching about trauma takes away your ability to feel joy and pleasure.
Yeah.
Because the moment you feel joy or pleasure, you worry that it's going to be taken away, or you worry you're going to get punished, or there's something linked to it that always comes. And so when a person has gifted specific trauma, well, maybe not even gifted specific trauma, maybe it's just trauma, when they start to feel the pleasure of their mind, just going along in the playground of their mind, they somatically panic, like the starts beating faster, and they clench their jaw, and they squeeze their eyes closed, and it's this resistance energy, like, no, I can't do that, I can't enjoy my mind. I mean, that is really that's the, like, let's say, most sad point, when I'm working with gifted people, just to watch how so many of us, don't have the internal permission to enjoy our minds, simply.
Yeah.
And to treat it as a playground, as opposed to, battlefield, and a battlefield or a prison, where it's like, get everything under control, and keep it down, keep it under control, keep it behind bars, keep everything in its place, and all of that stuff.
Yeah.
Or just a closet where everything's just thrown away, and you're just doing a routine trying to make everybody else happy, or whatever situation. So I know it's not like that for everybody, but that is a common reaction.
Definitely. Yeah. And it's so interesting now, because a lot of the traditional Buddhist practices that offer meditation and mindfulness haven't quite bridged into the scientific piece of things yet. And the somatics is a huge piece of mindfulness. Like, we think oftentimes, and I know I had never really expanded my idea of it initially, we think of mindfulness and it's just what's going on up here.
Yeah.
Right? And so you're sitting with, okay, well, what's going on here? My mind is here. But the mind is like, it's a huge, ecosystem of, and people don't think of it like that. And a lot of the traditional kinds of Buddhist practice, like, I've been on some retreats where people have come, like more secular kinds of retreats, where a lot of people have come from non-secular practices and have been like many years doing meditation practice. And they don't know how to support a lot of the somatic stuff for themselves. And, this is after many years of mindfulness practice. And there's, a lot of trauma that's just not been addressed, and they've not learned how to work with.
Yeah. The mind in dealing, oh, sorry, didn't mean to interrupt, go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead.
The word that always comes to my mind when I think about these situations is rigidity, and you have people who are practicing in a rigid fashion. So it's not like, oh, here's an interesting tool that I can, like, it's an elastic tool that I can use based on like my own inner world, my own outer world, my own needs. And not only my own needs, it's not like, oh, I have to practice the same way every day because my needs are always going to stay the same.
Yeah.
One day my mindfulness practice looks like this, the next day it looks like that. Maybe one day it looks like I'm rolling around in the fall leaves because I felt like it, because that felt good.
Yeah.
And maybe the next day it's me writing one of my books, and those could both look like, or it could be me literally sitting there, with my hands like that if I feel like it, depending on what I need for that day and what it means to be mindful that day. And that's a rigid practice. That's an internal, that's a practice that's based on my internal agency and my needs of the moment and my somatics.
Yeah.
A lot of the disciplines don't present themselves as so flexible. And of course I get that if you just said, okay, do whatever you feel like, then it doesn't look like a practice. But at the same time, it's about not looking at it as an authority over you, but as your playmate. This is my playmate. How are we gonna play today? Not, oh my God, it's my authority, it's my master, and I've got to do what it says. And then I will become a new person because it promises me that I will become a new person or something.
Then things are going to be they'll be a lot better. Everything
in my life is going to be better because I obeyed. And it's like, no. And again, there are some hard times where you just do the practice, even though you would feel like doing anything else instead. There would be times where I'd want to overeat, let's say, or obsess about a problem, or I don't know, some type of you know, sort of toxic behavior, self-destructive behavior. And then I'd say, this is probably a time to be mindful. It's going to suit you better to be mindful for the next half hour, and maybe just sit here with your hard thoughts than it is going to, you know, than it is going to hurt yourself. So like, there are those moments. It's not always, doesn't always feel like 100% play, but I think there's a certain playfulness that is, most of the time you can bring it in.
Yeah. Yeah.
It doesn't have to be that rigid practice.
No, it doesn't have to be. And, you know, that's been kind of my thing for the last several years. I mean, I started out doing a very traditional kind of Zen practice. And then I remember one time I was at a one-day retreat, and we were doing like a mindful movement thing. We were doing something with our hand, and you're just following it. And I remember thinking, I don't really feel anything. Like I could feel my arm, I see my arm, but I felt really disconnected from it. Which is weird for me because I trained as a dancer for many years, but you know, I think since then, not being in that practice anymore, the intellectual piece and the rigidity has, you know, had taken over, and I had that disconnect from my body. And I remember thinking that moment, okay, this is interesting. I feel like a bit of a robot. I felt a little bit robotic. I didn't feel like a connection to my arm moving. And I thought, okay, this is something that in the traditional practice that I was doing, we don't talk about the mind-body connection. So you know, that's something that I started exploring. And so for me, it's been kind of like this. I was joking with somebody the other day saying that I feel like I've kind of been the mindfulness hunter, where I've been like going around trying all of these different practices and exploring all these different things. And oh yeah, that's really good. I could, that, you know, that works really well. I can see how that works, and this works for, you know, this piece. And oh yeah, no, definitely,
yeah, it's definitely not that
thing. Oh gosh, yeah, I've been to some real doozies.
yeah, same.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I'll have to tell you about one because it's so funny. I went to this temple where they were, and it was close by, and I thought, oh, I'll go and check it out. It was in the Sri Lankan Buddhist tradition, and really lovely people. They were very welcoming for me to come into their community and practice with them. But when their leader came into the room and he came up to the front, it was like being back in church. It was like being in Sunday school. And I was like, oh my gosh. He sat there and he was reading from the sutras. And I'm not joking. He had a whiteboard, and he wrote out he was writing things out on the board, and then he pulled out this pointer like this plastic pointer that had a plastic hand on the end with the pointy finger, and he would point to what he wrote, and we would all repeat. And he would point to the next thing, and we would repeat it. And I'm kind of looking around. I'm like, this is a room full of grown men and women, full of grown adults, and we're like, this is like Sunday school. Yeah. Where we're repeating back, and people like were really engaged and really, and I'm going, okay, I'm going to get through this. I'm going to get through this hour and a half, because it would be really rude and disrespectful of me to get up and leave. So I'm going to use this as part of my practice to, you know, just be with this situation and what it is. And I, you know, went through the whole process, but I thought, yeah, that was, you know, clearly an example of no, not for me. So, you know, I think of people who ame, you know, going out to explore mindfulness or meditation or whatever, and have maybe had experiences like that and have been just like turned off of it, you know, because thinking that this is what it is. And for some people it is that, and that's fine, you know, if that kind of thing works for you, but it doesn't have to be that. No. You know? So that's kind of what I've really enjoyed doing is, you know, doing this cafeteria style approach where I, you know, just like picking what works, leaving what doesn't work, and building this kind of hybrid practice with all of these different tools. Like you were saying, it's not always just about sitting on a cushion, staring at a wall, or, you know, in doing a formal practice, there's all these different tools that you can use. It's like going to the gym or having a workout regime. Like, you know, maybe you're working on cardio one day, maybe you're doing working on back and shoulders and arms, maybe you're doing legs. Like, it's just whatever you feel to round out your practice or whatever you feel you need that day. You know, it's a lot like that. So there's lots of different ways that it can look.
Yeah, two things. So it reminds me, what you're talking about being in that situation, it reminds me of like the classic thing I hear, of course, from gifted people who, like, especially when they go to university and they're like, the other students are like taking copious notes and they're like looking around, they're like, but what's to learn? I don't get it. Like, it doesn't make any sense. Like, and then they start like doubting themselves. And so this is what happens for a lot of people, I think, that go in by mindfulness and find kind of a rigid approach or a Sunday schoolist approach or something where they're doubting themselves and they go, am I like just really bad at this? Or like, what's wrong with me because everybody else is super engaged? And it's just another one of those situations where it's like, your cognitive profile is very different. And so it makes you take in information differently. And you may not need this linear presentation of information. That actually might end up being harmful for you.
Yeah.
You know? But the other thing it makes me think of is just that you know, lots of people, I mean, not that situation, but what you've done, you know, going around testing out things and cultivating, you know, this wonderful toolkit that you've cultivated is like that. You know, you've been able to do this. You have the fortune. You have the fortune of having the time available to be able to do it, because a lot of people don't. A lot of, you know, gifted people, they could go try one thing, and if it doesn't work out, then, well, they're going to drop it, you know, because they can't go to a 10-day retreat and they can't go to, you know, a weekly thing on Wednesday nights or whatever and try out all of these different things. So I think one of the things that, you know, I was really excited about in starting the Gifted Mindfulness Collective, I dyslexia that every time, so just don't mind.
I do too.
I say things like gifted full mindfulness collection, like, you know, nonsense. So just things that start with GMC, basically. But yeah, so with what you're offering, and what I was so excited about is that it gives people the opportunity to go ahead straight to the toolbox that's been, you know, customized for the gifted person. So like, you don't have to go to, you know, somebody who participates doesn't have to go to, you know, 25 different events and teachers and whoever to try to find, you know, what they're doing. And it mirrors, of course, what I've been doing with the coaching network, which is, you know, finding gifted coaches who know about giftedness, who are trained in psychology, who are trained in coaching, who you can just start right there where you are. You don't have to do a whole lot of explaining. You don't have to catch them up. You don't have to teach them about about your giftedness. You don't have to go to 25 different people to finally find somebody who might sort of get what you're talking about or how your brain works, or whatever. So it's like having this really customized approach is so wonderful. And the fact that we're not talking about spirituality. We're not talking about like anything where somebody has to subscribe to anything. You know, there's no like subscribing to ideologies or anything else. It's truly this toolbox, like this curated toolbox of these things, which range from, like we said, play, ecstasy, joy, to, you know, the harder work, which is worth it, you know, the harder work that's worth it, but that you can, you know, test out all of these, and that it's not just one rigid approach, or even two rigid approaches together. It's a whole new dynamic, flexible approach, which you call robust mindfulness. And I love that term, you know, because that really explains this idea of bringing in all of the traditions, you know, the medical model, the medical model, scientific model, all the way to the you know, the deep roots of the Eastern traditions. You know, all of that, all of the richness of that, and the way that the different cultures have adapted that, you know, to their different cultures, and then bringing it to get all together with the gifted culture, and you know, presenting just the toolkit for that. It's like, I mean, you know, there are many of us who are like, thank you, you know, because that's not something that a lot of people would A, have the interest in doing, B, have the time to do, C, maybe have the money to do, maybe have social support to do, because it also takes that.
Oh my gosh, definitely. Yeah. Yeah. And that's something that I'm often thinking how grateful I am that I have social support, because it's really hard to engage in like a serious mindfulness practice if you don't have the support of the people around you.
It's very different.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna, as we're transitioning a little bit, I'm gonna turn on some lights because I'm feeling like it's getting really, really dark here. Is it?
Yes.
Is the lighting getting dark?
No, it's not super dark.
Okay, that's good that I'm thinking it now, because it got very, very dark here outside. So hopefully this will help you see me a little bit better. Excuse the interruption. There we go.
There we go.
That better?
Yes.
Okay. So so yeah, I mean, it's wonderful that people have the opportunity to have this customized approach, you know?
Yeah.
And can just jump in with the little bit of time or the little bit of money they have, and not have to go on the hunt as you have been on the mindfulness, you know?
Yeah, yes, go and do all the sampling, yes. And I mean, that's kind of what's so exciting about it, is that, you know, as people get the chance to kind of dabble in it, and this is something that I continue to, you know, I'm always working on deepening my own practice and sampling new things. Like, so even the Gifted Mindfulness Collective, as it's being launched in January, it has changed dramatically from the 2 courses that I offered a year ago.
Yeah.
And, you know, that's just a reflection of my own growth process, and in working with the gifted people who came and did the courses, like what worked and what didn't work. And so, yeah, it's just like this constantly evolving thing, which is so exciting to have emerge.
I know, it's so dynamic and beautiful as it evolves.
Yeah, yeah.
So it would be interesting, I think, to hear a little bit more about the courses that you gave last year, how that, like, what that taught you in terms of, you know, what is relevant for the gifted person that's looking to get into mindfulness or deepen their practice, and what you're bringing into then the courses that are going to come up. And at some point, of course, we should probably say very, very clearly what the Gifted Mindfulness Collective is.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, so the 2 courses that I ran gosh, it's a year ago now, almost. It's so interesting because I love talking about the science piece of thing, My background in psychology was neuroscience. And so, like, pretty much all gifted people, it's like understanding the why behind things. And so I've really bridged that into, like, talking about, okay, what is actually happening in the brain? And, you know, when we talk about, oh, it rewires the brain, well, what does that mean? What does that look like for a gifted person? And so we talk about things like right down at that level, like a neuroscience level. And I don't talk about it in like a super sciencey kind of a way, but just in like a more general kind of way. And, you know, people are always going, oh my gosh, that's so cool. And then when you see how the practices bridge over top of that, all of a sudden you have this framework. Whereas if you're just going into a lot of mindfulness classes or meditation class, you don't have that framework all of the time. It's just kind of like you're sitting there and doing these practices, but I'm not really sure I understand what's the why behind it. So we talk a lot about the why behind all of this, like what's going on in the mind. And you know, one of the things that will be different with the Gifted Mindfulness Collective and the courses is the mind-body connection, which we didn't have an opportunity to really get into. The first couple of times. We did it over 4 weeks. I think they were 2-hour sessions or maybe 90-minute sessions. And it was just a lot of material, especially, you know, with gifted people, there's like all this good discussion and questions. And so we just ended up, there was too much packed into it. So these courses will be longer in the GMC. And then there's going to be the embodied mindfulness is going to be a separate course. Where I'm really going to dive into a lot of the somatic pieces of things, because that's like such a integral. And I think I started talking about that at one point earlier in our conversation, and I probably got sidetracked into something else, but that has been a big piece for me is, I was talking about having that disconnect with my arm in the retreat. And so I started exploring, okay, the somatics piece of this. And that's a really big thing for gifted people, especially if you have really strong intellectual overexcitabilities, if, as you were mentioning, if you have had trauma, things like that. And so I've spent a lot of time really studying and learning about trauma and how that works into mindfulness, because that is really important to have the tools to recognize when something is coming up, how to work with it, and not, I know a lot of people who have had issues with trauma and have gone into mindfulness. The instruction that's usually given to them is, oh, well, just sit with it. Just sit with it. And yet, no, like, you can't, especially when you have the intensity of it, the gifted intensity of it, you shouldn't be just sitting with it. So, there's the trauma-informed piece as well that will play into that. Which we did have in the first couple of courses, but we didn't really go much into the somatics. So the embodied mindfulness course that will be another offering, will go into that much deeper. And I think too, one of the big things that came up for a lot of gifted people was compassion, because gifted people feel that empathy and sense of compassion so deeply, and it can be really overwhelming. And so that'll definitely be something that I spend more time talking about and teaching practices on how to work with that and how to move through that. And again, I talk about it from a neuroscience standpoint. Okay, when this happens, what's going on in your mind? What's going on internally with the mind body? And usually when you have that understanding and then you have a tool that you can use, it's like, okay. And then, so that's the whole mindfulness thing. You have all these insights around things. So when it comes up in your daily life, you start more and more recognizing it, and you know what practices and tools that you can bring in to work with it. And then, the amazing thing that you have to, whenever you're learning anything, it's, this lots of attention that you're paying to it up front, but then over time, the practice starts to remember you. So you don't have to remember it anymore. It just happens over time as you continue to work with it. And that's a really beautiful thing to see unfold.
Oh, yeah, and how that weaves together with the gifted development aspect. So what I've seen from the people that have gone through your courses, people that I've worked with individually, or in another context, I've seen their gifted, let's say gifted self-awareness and their ability to harness their gifts for their own authentic value system, really skyrocket. But not, so it's not like do mindfulness so that you can whatever, but it's like we talked about before, having that spaciousness and having those tools, understanding how your mind works, knowing how to deal with the intensities. The other stuff just becomes easier to navigate. Yeah. It's like there's space to navigate it, because a lot of what, and a lot of what we're doing at the beginning of coaching is just, ironically helping people to slow down. So if they've already slowed down, get out of frantic, panic, whatever mode. So if they've already slowed down through mindfulness and they have a way of training their, their speed in terms of expectations of themselves, then they can come into the giftedness discovery with a certain, let's say, equanimity, and okay, so I'm doing this and I'm committed to it, and that's great. And I will take it, one moment at a time, and I will really put my all into that moment, but I won't judge myself, pressure myself, blame myself, whatever, for not being able to do more than I can do. Because a lot of people go all right, what's this giftedness discovery thing? Let's just get this done with. Come on, I want to just integrate it into my life so I don't have to think about it. Yeah. Especially because of the shame of saying the word gifted, especially because of the social aspect, especially because a lot of times somebody's been suffering for so long in, like, let's say, a bad career, and they just want to fix it today. What am I supposed to do? I will switch it tomorrow. Just let me know what it is, you know. So having somebody who's going through your course, or who has gone through your course, yeah, it's really nice, because there's this spaciousness there, and then you can really do the work. I mean, you can just get to the work. You just get to the work, because the preparations have been done, and you don't have to do okay, but you're gonna have to slow down, in the sense that, you know, you don't have to force yourself, but you're gonna have to sort of now do what you can in the present moment, because the rest is very noisy. Judgment, blame, all of this stuff. It's extremely noisy and extremely distracting. So you're gonna have to get rid of that. Otherwise, we're not really gonna be able to move forward at any decent pace that's gonna be satisfying to either one of us. You know?
Yeah. So, and the interesting thing is, like, a lot of those things, getting them cognitively does not help. Like, you can understand, oh, I need to slow down, and okay, yeah. But if you don't have the internal resources, you know, and that's where the mind-body connection comes in, like being able to have that spaciousness and I guess the capacity, like the nervous system capacity to be able to hold all that. You can think about it until the cows come home, and it's only going to get you so far. So it's really about going beyond the thinking piece of it, and we talk a lot about that in you know, in the mindfulness course, about getting beyond the thinking piece of it and getting into the felt experience of it. Right?
And that's particularly relevant for people who are dealing with like basically a social ecology around them that may be resistant to their giftedness, may be dismissive of it, may be skeptical, maybe whatever, because finally being like recognized for who you are and getting some mirroring through coaching or through a community or something, then going to your, let's say, spouse or your partner or your friends or whatever, or your parents, and going, hey, I learned this about myself, and having the, you know, having a, oh, like, that's not true, or you're being arrogant or whatever, all the things that come along with that, that can be really, like, you know, a physical blow. And I've seen that physical blow really stop people in their tracks, and they just say, no, I can't go there because I can't risk this. I mean, you know, then it activates sort of survival mechanisms, like I have to belong somewhere, and this is my primary place, and so if I don't belong here, then you know, and even if they belong in the you know, like say Intergifted, and they feel like they belong there, that's great, but it's an online community. It's not the same thing as who you go home to at night. You know, so it's like, if you have that space, if you've cultivated that space, and you're aware of the physical sensations and how to handle that, it can allow you to go through the process of, let's say, allowing your social ecosystem to update itself, because it's not like people are going to be resistant for the rest of all time. You know, it's the same old coming out story, whether you're coming out because you're gay or because you're coming out because whatever, in this case gifted, any coming out story, it's basically the same thing, that at first everybody goes, oh my god, you know, but then they realize that they love you and they want to get to know you for who you are, and most of the time there's not going to be some sort of final rejection. Most of the time they're going to come around, but it takes a lot of, say, you know, somatic fortitude to be able to sustain that, and to stay strong, to feel strong in yourself, to not take it personally that the other person is like rejecting this essential part of you, and to, you know, just be able to sit with the pain, because it is a legitimate suffering. That you can't just make it go away. You're not going to make it go away, even from like saying, okay, well, I'm just stopping in my tracks and I'm not going to continue this giftedness exploration. You know, that doesn't solve it either, because then you're still stuck and not being able to get to know yourself. So anyway, you know, you're having this this somatic suffering, and if you don't have the tools to know how to sit with that and be, you know, to sustain the pain, so to speak, you know, while things work themselves out socially, as they will, because the cycles go that at first people freak out, and then they, you know, then it's a lot harder to face that with that equanimity, you know.
Definitely. And so many people, like, and a lot of people aren't even conscious, because it's just like this neural pattern that has developed over the years, and you are not even conscious that it's happening anymore. But just to notice what your mind is doing, and so often we're beating ourselves up because it's like, basically the message is you've got to fit in, you've got to pull it together, you've got to,
Yep.
so that you fit in and that you belong, so that you're safe.
Yeah.
And so, the beautiful thing that we explore in the mindfulness course is, how can you be the safe space for yourself that you've not had? And how can you give yourself the support that you've not had? And that can be a really challenging process in and of itself, that how can I support myself?
How can I belong with myself?
How can I belong with myself? Yeah.
So it would be an interesting time to talk about the community aspect of the collective, because I kind of developed all this on my own. I didn't really join any community or anything.
Yeah.
I was kind of like a hermit on a couple year retreat, like sitting there figuring it out. I mean, I did, have a teacher here and there and did the retreats here and there, but I was kind of alone, and I learned to belong with myself, but it was a kind of a hard road.
Yeah.
And I'm curious to hear kind of what your take is on how the community aspect of, maybe you can tell a little bit about what the community aspect will entail, but how that will help a person in terms of the belonging question, like training their sense of being able to belong with themselves because they belong to a community who's in the process of learning how to, each person is a gifted person, learning how to belong with themselves.
Yeah. Well, I think, just in what you said, that's the beautiful nature of it. There's a couple of elements to how valuable a community is, especially for a mindfulness practice, because it is hard sometimes, sort of like going to the gym. If you've paid for this membership and, okay, well, I'm making this commitment to myself and I've paid for it, so I'm going to go. And when there's other people going for the same reasons, it's a motivational kind of thing, right? And so there's that element of it, definitely. But, as you're saying, all of these people are coming together, all of these gifted people are coming together for the same reason. They've had even though the specific experiences may have been different, the suffering is very similar. And that sense of, feeling like you don't belong, and gifted shame, all of those kinds of things. Everybody is bringing that into the community. And it's kind of like, we're here for ourselves to learn how to support ourselves, but we're here for each other as well. And so this is like, it's that sense of belonging as well. Like, we're practicing not just for ourselves, but we're practicing for each other to support one another. I think that's a really important piece about mindfulness, is that we don't just do it for ourselves. If everybody were practicing mindfulness, you imagine like the different kind of world that we would live in. So we practice for those reasons as well. It's for other people, and it's for relationships with people. And as you interact with people in a mindfulness community, and it's, there's no judgment, you come as you are, and it's just open and, very much like Intergifted.
Yeah.
You come as you are, and we're going to practice together and see these transformations happen. And you can, as you're interacting with other people as well, you get the opportunity to try out mindfulness in relationship, right? Like, try out some of these tools in relationship with people. Talk about the things that you're struggling with, or, hear other people's experiences and learning from one another in that sense.
And I think seeing other people, oh, sorry.
Yeah, I was done.
Okay. I think also seeing other people play, like,
play.
It's very inspiring. I mean, this has been one of the things for me, working with you, working with some of the different teachers that I did work with, it was very inspiring to see somebody play like that with their mind, and approach it with a joyful, spirit, and to go, I could do that too. That's awesome. To get that mirrored. It's really refreshing. And that leads me to kind of a funny / very important point to mention, is that, in all of this, you really are approaching this as a peer of the people that will be in the course and that will be in the community. Like, this is a peer situation. This is not Kelly is coming as a guru.
I am not a guru.
No, this is no guru energy to it at all. This is very much, you know, as a gifted peer who has done this curation process and loves to connect with people in this way and support people in this way, and gets equally supported by this aspect, you know. So I think that's an important thing to mention, because this is not, you know, this is not the kind of dynamic we're thinking about when we think of community. You will be in, you know, some of the science, you'll be bringing in the toolkit, etc. But it's really, everything's a jumping off point for each individual person and where they're at in their life, why they're engaging with these practices. It's not like, I'm Kelly, with, you know, with a scarf, and I will be, like, we were talking the other day about, you know, the typical.
I'm going to send you a picture of myself, and you frame it and put it up on your special table.
We were joking the other day about the voice, you know. Hello, everybody. We're going to be practicing mindfulness today. No, you won't have to deal with any of this. This is pure conversation among gifted people. And just the joy in practicing together, and being able to face the challenges and the opportunities together, just as a team, you know, simply. But again, for each individual's purpose for being there, you don't have, you know, as an attendee or as a participant in the community, there's no expectation that you'll come with our vision for you and why you're engaging with this. I mean, as long as it's respectful to the rest of us, good. It's good.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I definitely, I'll be bringing in other people to talk about their experiences with mindfulness, and I'm really hoping I can do more, you know, chats like this, talking with other gifted people and their experience with mindfulness, because it can look very different. There's so many different ways to practice mindfulness. So I do want to bring in other people, and I think that's so important to, you know, that's that cafeteria style, like, get different perspectives on things. And because sometimes the way one person explains it can be really helpful to a lot of people, but maybe somebody needs to hear it a little bit differently, and you might get that from another person, right? So,
well, and this is also true for the giftedness levels question, you know. So somebody's coming in as a mildly gifted person, they might hear the information in one way. Somebody that's coming in as a profoundly gifted person, typically, you know, the higher up you are on the scale, the less linear instruction means to you, and actually it just means more irritation usually and frustration. So there's really room to be interacting with the material in vastly different ways depending on where you are at on the scale, and also depending on basically what your areas of intelligence are, because somebody that comes in with strong imaginational and emotional intelligence may have somewhat of an easier time getting into this. Somebody who comes with strong intellectual intelligence as the dominating intelligence, it doesn't have a whole lot of the others, may struggle more, you know. So or whatever combination. And so it's like working with whatever your unique cognitive profile is. And I kind of throw this in there, not to like sell our services or something, but for somebody who's coming in who doesn't know how they learn best and who doesn't know their giftedness level and doesn't know any of that, you know, you may want to consider having an assessment with me or with our coach Silver, because looking at your cognitive profile can really help prepare you for going into a course or going into any sort of learning environment and getting out of it. Because if you know how your brain works best, you can go in and say, okay, this is how I need to interact with the material. This is how I need to interact with the facilitator in order to get what I need from it. Because the temptation is always, and we gifted people have been traumatized by this many times in learning environments, I think. And I sort of use the word traumatized lightly, but some of us have seriously been traumatized by this, and is that going in and being expected to just swallow the material however it's presented, like in your, you know, hand pointer thing.
Repeat after me.
Right. And now that we're adults and we're independent, we don't want to have to do that anymore. Like, that doesn't work. We shouldn't have had to do it back then. And but we probably, most of us did. And we don't have to do that now. Like, there's no reason that we have to recreate those scenarios for ourselves. But it helps if you know what your cognitive profile is going in.
Definitely.
Because then you don't, I mean, I could know that I don't learn I don't learn well according to the traditional things. But if I come in and I go, well, I hope she's not going to teach it according to the traditional things, and then I don't speak up or I don't, engage with you to let you know, hey, this is how I learned best. Is there some way we could interact in this way? You won't know, I won't know, and then I'll get the best of what I can, but it's not the same thing as really coming in as a student or participant who's knowledgeable about themselves and who's able to really proactively, take true agency in the situation and go, I'm so excited to do this. This is how it's going to work for me. Let's do it. And within reason, I mean, of course, we can make accommodations for the different people.
Right.
The more they know ahead of time, the better it is for them. And to some degree, you and the rest of the group as well. Yeah. So it's something that, you can go to our website and learn about and get in touch with us if that's something interesting to you.
Yeah, definitely. That's really valuable. I mean, it's certainly, like you said, certainly not necessary, but it really enhances the experience and just adds that extra level of value to what you're going to take out of it and how you're going to go through, a course or get into a practice. So, I mean, that I should talk a little bit about, because we've been sort of talking about all these different pieces of it, but I'm going to do it a little more linearly. So I apologize to the people who have to now suffer through my linear.
Well, but they will. I mean, everybody needs to know the practical logistics as well. I mean, we should have like a thing that flashes on the screen for 2 seconds with all of the linear points, I mean, later it'll all be on our website as well anyway, but.
Yes, or yes, a flash of linear alerts, like to let people know what's coming up. So you can tune out if you need to. So the elements of the Gifted Mindfulness Collective is there'll be courses. So there'll be a foundations course for people who just really want to explore the basics that you would need to know to start your own mindfulness practice as a gifted person. And that's where we talk about, some of the basic tools that you need, the neuroscience and all of the psychology pieces behind it and how all of that ties in. At some point next year, there will be an embodied mindfulness course as well. That will be like a wonderful follow-on to the foundations course. But then one of the things that I had learned from the first two courses that I ran last year is how valuable it would be for people to have an opportunity for ongoing practice, because you meet once a week, and I mean, it can be valuable to sit in the hour and a half or whatever time that we're together for the course. But I think there were a lot of people who just, took the hour and a half and then didn't have time or didn't carve out time to do anything with it until we met the following week for the next little bit. And it's really because it is a practice, and I think you commented on it earlier, there's work involved in having a practice. So there will be opportunities for shared practice in this community, and there will be, just daily, very brief, informal kind of meditation practices that are guided practices that I'll be offering for people who might find that valuable. That was something that I found over the years I really wished I could have had, but there just weren't those opportunities. And so that will be an opportunity for people who want to take advantage of it. There'll be weekly, longer, more formal kinds of practices where, we can share experiences, where we can actually sit and do formal practice, but then also talk about, some of the psychology pieces and the other, I guess, more cognitive kind of stuff that support a practice, which are really important pieces as well. And then I will be bringing in other people for more. Every once in a while, we'll do like more extended. I'd love to do like day long. May not be able to do like full day kind of online retreats, but bringing in other people to offer their perspectives on mindfulness and, sitting together in a live format, even though it's online, and learning from one another that way. So those are kind of the two main components of our, I guess the three main components. There's the shared practice, the courses, the live community gatherings that we'll be having. And then, there'll be a large component of it that will be information from like videos like these. I would love to start doing more interviews with people so how we can learn from other gifted people who have been doing mindfulness for a long time, because there are a lot of people who have been. And so, what can we glean from that for our own practice? So we'll have opportunities to learn from those kinds of interactions. And I think those are kind of I feel like I'm leaving something out.
Well, I think we'll talk about the research piece. I'm sorry, the research and outreach piece after, but I want to interject something nonlinear here, just for people like me who struggle with the word practice.
Oh, yeah.
So many times in my life, because I struggle with like basically anything systems oriented, I mean, in terms of being in the system, and I struggle with anything that's like tries to claim authority over me, that kind of, makes alarm bells go off, especially because of the way I was raised, as I described before. So the word practice really triggered a lot of somatic stuff for me, resistance and like, don't control me, like don't tell me what I'm supposed to do, even though there was nobody telling me what I was supposed to do at all.
Yeah.
That's the word practice, because you're practicing for a goal, and that's always the idea of the word practice.
Right. Yeah.
And so I had to work with myself on that to find a way that it felt exciting for me to do, as opposed to like a chore or a duty. So I switched it over in my head to the idea of mental training, because I knew I needed mental training. Not for anybody else, but so I could sit and live with myself 24 hours a day, because that was the pain in the ass, Mental training, so I can have better control over my mind, so I can enjoy it. So that this is a nice playground, as opposed to a playground full of mean bullies and monsters all the time, So I just want to throw that out there for anybody who's like, when they hear you say the word practice, they feel the somatic response of like total resistance. Because I could imagine somebody going, oh, that sounds really great what they're describing. And then you say, okay, we're going to have this, and then it's a practice, and you're going to have group practice. And they're like, because of this somatic resistance to the idea of practicing for somebody, for the authority, for the group, for the, for somebody else. So yeah, I mean, I use mental training. It's the way that I say it in my head. I still now, I mean, after so many years of doing it, like, okay, I can say practice without that somatic thing for myself now, because I know exactly what I mean when I'm saying it. It has nothing to do with anybody else or anybody else's expectation for me. It's just me practicing being in my own head, in a joyful manner. But yeah, so for anybody, you could use mental practice, you could use some other thing. It's kind of like fill in the blank. Most people use practice just because it's simple, but even for the piano, for example, that's something I've changed as well. I don't say I practice piano, because that's what I was said growing up, got to practice your piano for your lesson so your teacher doesn't get mad. And I hated practicing. So I've turned it, as an adult, I've turned it into training.
Okay.
And I'm training for me, because I like to hear myself play. And I like play. So it's like, oh yeah, that's easy. So anyway, it could be another word, but that could be a really nice linguistic opportunity for people who are struggling.
Yeah. And I mean, it's so interesting. I mean, that's such a mindful thing. Like that's a really important insight, right? To notice that the use of this word, when I hear it, when I use it, triggers this somatically for me. Like that's a really huge insight for anybody to have. So, and it doesn't, and that's where we get into the trap with words, right? It's just a word. So if the word triggers that for you, then change the word to something that works for you.
Call it balloon. I mean, just like invent something. It's totally irrelevant. It's like,
yes. Sandwiches. I'm going to do mindfulness sandwiches.
Ice cream.
Yeah.
I'm just doing my ice cream.
Yes. Yeah. There are no rules. There's no rules.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. So, okay, so I was, interjecting that but then maybe you can just briefly mention about the research and outreach pieces, which will be coming along a little bit later on.
Yeah, so that's the research piece will be a part of interviewing people and I don't want to even use the word interview, it's just chats. It's like sort of like what we're doing and kind of gathering information about, okay, what has worked for gifted people, like who have been doing these mindfulness practices, maybe informally, formally for many years, and just kind of gathering all of that qualitative information and putting it together to kind of start creating this picture of what the gifted mindfulness experience looks like, which could be very helpful for clinicians who are now starting to bridge a lot of mindfulness work into their practices, teachers, other researchers. There's a lot of researchers now starting to look at mindfulness. So these kinds of understanding how gifted people have been using it over the years could be very informative. But then even just informative to us as, I'll say the word practitioners, but sandwich eaters, ice cream lickers, whatever you want, trainers, mindfulness trainers, whatever you choose to call it.
Yeah.
That information, that kind of research can be really beneficial for just for your own benefit. So yeah, there'll be this research piece of it that will gradually start to unfold. And then the outreach piece is, something that will be unfolding as well, and is kind of just a little bit of a seedling right now. But I would really like to look at how to bring mindfulness. There's a lot of work right now happening in prison programs to help with the transformation of people who are in prison. And we know about this 20% number that's sort of floating around. About 20% of people in prison are gifted people, and that number could be a lot higher. And people that I've spoken with, they say, yeah, there's definitely a lot of really bright minds that have just not had the support. And so I would love to be able to, sort of bridge the mindfulness work and the giftedness piece into those kinds of programs to see how, just to try to benefit people who have, just not had the same kind of opportunity and support that other people have been fortunate to have. So that's the outreach piece. Again, it's, and I've had people since announcing this initiative, I've had a lot of people reach out to me asking about, will you be doing things for kids and families? What about doing things in schools? So there's lots of possibilities that can come out of it. So we'll just have to
and if anybody is interested in those extra possibilities, I think the mindfulness for gifted families, families with either a gifted parent or gifted kid, or all gifted, or some combination. I think there's a lot of people in our community that would really benefit from something like that. So for example, that's something we'd be happy to figure out how to bring to you if you're interested. So
definitely,
or just send us a line and let us know that you're interested, and that'll and what kind of questions you have around that version of a practice, or a mental training, mind training, and then we would custom create the course to whatever all of your needs are around that issue. So that would be great. Or if there's in schools or whatever, I mean, we're open. This is what we like to do. We like to create new things, that bridge gaps that nobody's bridged before. That's what we're super passionate about. So let us know, and we'll build it in.
Yeah, definitely. And I will add one thing because it popped into my head, and I think it's important, talking about families and bridging mindfulness into gifted families. I've had a number of parents who have taken the Mindfulness for Gifted People courses and have said, I'm already seeing differences in implementing these tools in my relationship with my kids in our family. Or we talk about a tool and parents have said, oh my gosh, I'm doing this with my kids. This is so good. Like I'm gonna teach this to my kids. And Yeah, so even though you're maybe doing a gifted mindfulness course for yourself as an adult, it will ripple outwards. It will, and I say that personally. It has my own personal practice. My son does mindfulness through his school, but he does it because he has to. He doesn't have his own. Nobody else in my family practices mindfulness. I'm the only person who does. And my own practice has transformed the entire dynamic in our family. And I don't mean that in an egotistical way at all.
Or like that you were a savior of your family or something.
No, it's actually nothing. It's nothing that I have done. It's just this spaciousness that I have created and my ability to manage my own mind and, manage my own nervous system and everything that comes up with it. And it's just completely transformed my family. So I just wanted to throw that out there for, people who think, oh, I would love to have this for my kids. Do it for yourself and watch to see how it transforms everything.
Well, and like I have to throw in there as well, and Kelly is a coach in our network, and so I send clients to her, and everybody that works with you, I often send moms to Kelly because that's kind of her specialty, and they're always coming back to me, oh my God, thank you so much. I can't believe how much my life has changed in just 1 or 2 sessions because of implementing just some of these basic practices or training or whatever, and with their kids and everything. It's really amazing to see. So and I wanted to mention that you are also, for people who are like not ready to do a group thing, they're not in the space to do that, or don't have the money all up front, or they don't have the time, or they have kids at home and they're never going to be able to get an hour and a half of quiet time on a Friday night or whenever the course is going to be, that they can explore just one-on-one work with you, that you are available for that, and you do through Intergifted. So for that,
it can go both ways. I have a lot of clients who are just waiting for, when is your course starting? I get really excited for the course. So clients who are waiting for that. But then the reverse is also true. If you can't commit to a course for whatever reason, you're not ready or whatnot, definitely can work with you one-on-one. I just naturally build that into my work with people.
It's exciting stuff.
It is very exciting. Yes. So if people want to learn more about the Gifted Mindfulness Collective, there are a couple of ways you can. We haven't posted that much yet. It's launching in January, so we're still in the process of building a lot of all of the pieces for it. But if you go to Intergifted, Intergifted.com, there you'll see the links for the Gifted Mindfulness Collective, and you can get on the wait list to find out when the course is going to be offered. The other option is to go to my website, which is kellypryde.com, and Pryde is, you can see it up on the screen. It's with a Y, not an I, kellypryde.com. And you can link to the Gifted Mindfulness Collective page there, and you can just message me and ask to be put on the GMC list, and I will keep you posted on things when everything is unfolding and how it's unfolding and what we've got going on, and you can kind of stay in the loop that way. And then of course on Intergifted's website, intergifted.com, there's all the information as well about coaches, assessments if you want to understand your cognitive profile, and of course the community is there as well. There's articles, there's all kinds of wonderful stuff on the Intergifted website. Yes, there's just so much there to explore. So definitely you have those 2 avenues to get more information, and of course reach out to us anytime. Our contact information is on our website. So we're always open and available for chats on how we can support people and help you figure out what would work best for you as a gifted person. So I think we've covered everything.
Yeah, everything.
Everything and then some.
That was just the beginning. We could keep going forever, but
oh my gosh, yeah, I know.
Yeah.
I had to rein myself in a little bit when we start talking about neuroscience, because I get so excited talking, and my kids always laugh at me because they're like, "Oh, here goes mom. She's talking about the brain again." We'll just go off on a huge tangent.
Well, hey, listen, I mean, I think if they're going to say, "Oh, here goes mom, she's talking about something again," like, good thing it's the brain. You know? It's not like, "Oh, she's complaining about her friends again," or something, you know.
Or her wine.
Yeah.
About her wine.
Right. Like, no, you're talking about really good stuff.
Yeah. It's usually books or brains.
Yep. And that's why we love you.
All right. So thank you so much for your time today, Jen, and for this wonderful chat. It was so good. And
same here. And thanks for everything you're doing. I mean, really everything you're doing for our community, for, you know, even people outside of our community that'll find us through your work. It's really wonderful. And, you know, I'm very aware of all of the time that goes in before coming up with something like this, you know, so kudos to you back then, and a big thank you from the present to the you back then who has been, you know, putting in all the work, and those times sitting through the, you know, hand point presentation, and all of the challenges that you went through to get to the point where you could bring us this cultivated version. I mean, a big thanks to the past you as well as the present.
It's my pleasure, honestly. Yeah, there was suffering along the way, but the journey it's you know, just been so exciting, and you know, the fact that now I get to share this with other people is just so exciting for me. So yeah, thanks for that, and just really looking forward to seeing this emerge and unfold. And you know, big thanks to you as well, because all of this has emerged and unfolded because of the space that you've created, right? So it's, you know, just a really beautiful interconnected emergence of things, which is amazing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Which is funny because your thing also emerged because of Silver's partner project, Prep and Integrity.
Yes.
So really all does sort of interconnect, and
it absolutely does. Yeah.
So we look forward to seeing you all in the mindfulness community, in the courses, in Intergifted's community. However we see you, we look forward to it. Yes,
and thanks for being here with us for this hour and a bit that we've been chatting, and hopefully we will connect soon.
All right.
Bye,
everybody.
Bye.